We got a hot mic? Hey, how about that? Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. This is a class on things Jesus has taught us to do. And what have we been talking about for the last 3 weeks? Talking about prayer. What do you remember from what we've talked about that is meaningful to you or has impacted you? Anything at all? This is review, by the way. Oh man, it must have been a horrible 3 weeks. Nope, nobody's got anything. Okay, don't be like the Pharisee. What was wrong with the way the Pharisee did things? Anybody know? He prayed to be seen by men, so we don't pray to be seen by men. Does that count when you're out in public eating at a restaurant? Is that a, nope. Depends on how you do it. If you do it to be seen by people, then yeah. What else? Anything else? What's that? Pouring out your soul is a definition. Ron? Pray all the time. Never stop praying. Paul wrote, I think it was to the Thessalonians, and said, pray without ceasing, just like don't ever stop breathing. Don't ever stop eating. Just things that need to be done regularly. Harold?
For me, one of the things is, it looks like in the past that sometimes I've been, instead of talking to God and asking God for help and forgiveness, I'm talking to myself or somebody else that's sitting there at the table or something like that. That becomes, for me, that's really important. I am trying to talk to the Father.
Right.
And so I can let that get away from me real easy if I'm not careful.
You mean in the sense that you'd be too casual, or?
You're praying, but you're praying more that you're praying within yourself, I think, personally. But I think when I pray, I want to make sure I'm talking to the Father.
Okay.
And if I'm not careful about that, it'd be pretty easy to not get that kind of attention to it personally.
Okay. Very good. Anybody else? Amy?
I think you said last week that how can God answer a prayer if we don't pray?
Yes. How can he answer a prayer or fulfill a request that we don't make? How can he bless an effort we don't make? So make the effort. Excellent. Very good. So we did cover some stuff that maybe was helpful. All right. It's like somebody said about preaching and meals. You might not remember everything you ate last week, but it did you good. And maybe that's the way it is sometimes with our Bible studies. We can't remember everything we studied, but it still does us good. It nourishes the soul. This morning, let's start talking about what Jesus says about telling others about the gospel, talking to people about God, talking to people about spiritual things. And I'm glad to see that you did not recoil when I mentioned that. A lot of people do. I intentionally did not use the E word because that scares a lot of people. You know what the E word is? Oh, you said it. Evangelism. That's scary. What is evangelism? It's showing Christ through your life. What else is evangelism? Any effort you make to bring people closer to God or to help bring God into their lives, that's evangelism. And it doesn't matter who it is. If you're trying to help somebody understand God better or encourage them to be a little more mindful of God in their lives, all of that is evangelism. Excellent. Glad to see more folks coming in. Lots of room to be seated in here today. Now, the first thing I did when I thought about this particular part of the class, what passages could I use to introduce this idea of evangelism? But here's a question. Do we really need Bible passages that tell us to tell people about Jesus? I mean, think about it. We should be so overjoyed that we're talking to people about it with everybody, just like anything that we really enjoy in life, anything we find valuable in life. If you came across a good mechanic and somebody said something about their car having trouble, what's the first thing you'd do? You would not say, oh, I don't want to talk to them about my mechanic. I don't want to tell him what a great mechanic he is. I don't want to tell him he doesn't charge much. I don't want to tell him he gets the job done on time every time. No, yeah. If you go out somewhere and you eat a really good hamburger, what are you going to do? If it's that easy to tell people about mechanics and hamburgers, here's a question, and I'm not asking this as a reprimand. I'm asking us this question to get us to think, because I have to think about this. Why don't we find it as easy to tell people about Jesus? Mike? Yes. Who's going to reject you if you tell somebody about a mechanic? Who's going to reject you if you tell them about a really good hamburger you found? Nobody I have ever talked to about a restaurant. Well, no, I don't think it's good to get good food when you're out in public. I like to pay lots of money for food that doesn't taste good and service that's horrible. No. You tell them about a restaurant you like that's got good food and good prices and good service. Yeah, where is that? That's what they want to know, because they're not going to reject that. What else about that? Rejection's one thing. What's part of the thing about talking to people about God? They might have to change something in their life. Here's the thing, and I'm not saying this is any kind of an excuse by any stretch of the imagination, but I just want us to understand the reality, at least reality for me and evidently for Paul. If I tell somebody about a really good hamburger, that does not put them under any obligation whatsoever. We just enjoy the conversation about a good hamburger. If I mention a good mechanic, they might think, well, I don't really want to use that guy, but it's still no big deal between us because there's no moral obligation regarding a good mechanic. But if we're talking to people about God, they know. They know that they need to be conscious of God. Now, there may be some people that you've run into who have totally pushed God out of their life and out of their mind so far that they don't even think about it anymore. But almost everyone has some understanding that they need to seek out God. I believe that to be true from experience. And the people who know that the best and the most are the ones who might tend to disagree with you and be upset with you when you start talking about God. Why is that? Or is that even true? Is there any truth to that? Steve?
Decision not to believe God, and they don't want to be reminded of that decision that they made one day, because it's a pretty big decision, and
right?
And they made that, and they don't want to be reminded about it.
And they're making it all over again if you bring up their moral obligation to God, because nobody has a moral obligation to me. And really, nobody has a moral obligation to the church. The moral obligation is to God. And that's how we become members of the church, when we recognize that obligation. Preston?
How the Jews treated Jesus, and he was challenged with what they believed and how they reacted. Sometimes we get that reaction when we challenge someone. You don't necessarily challenge them, but you present them with what you think is the truth, and if it's not what they believe, then they can get upset with you. You know, that's why it's so important that we show it in love.
Yes. Atheists. I'm not going to badmouth atheists, but let me ask you this question. Do you know of any other A people? In other words, a theist is somebody who believes in God. When you put the A in front of it, the A, it's from, I don't remember from Latin or Greek, but the A is negating whatever comes next, and so the atheist. Is there anything else that people are A about? What? Oh, agnostic. What is an agnostic? Okay, you don't know if there's a God, and you can't know that there's a God. That's what an agnostic is. He's not saying there is no God. He's saying, well, there might be, but you can't know. But still, that has to do with with God, an agnostic, an atheist. Do you know anybody who is an gnome? What is a gnome? It's like an elf or a leprechaun. You've heard of gnomes. Don't you remember the movie, The Gnome Mobile? Do you know anybody who is an gnome? Now, who believes in gnomes? Hardly anybody really believes in gnomes, but they don't proclaim themselves as gnomes. How about unicorns? You know anybody who's a unicorn? And why don't people proclaim themselves unicorns if they don't believe in unicorns? Well, here's the reason. Everybody knows there aren't any unicorns. Everybody knows there aren't any gnomes. But people know there is a God, but they don't want that information. This is me giving my opinion about why a lot of folks are atheists. And so they proclaim themselves to be atheists, and that becomes a major part of their lives. If you don't believe in something, why would that become a major part of who you are? But that's what proclaiming yourself to be an atheist does.
That's what a lot of kids learn when they go to college.
It is.
The science classes, ignore, it's all evolution, God, the world is God.
It's true.
That's a real challenge, and I think if we've got routines up to the point where they get out on their own life, part of that is impacted by what they've learned in school. If they go to college, they start looking at science classes. That's a huge influence. So I think all we can do is the best we can do. Pray and ask God for help in that matter to me.
Right. It just sometimes seems like we're so helpless against that, but it's true.
That little preparation of information that talks about the evidences that you could use, I think that's worthwhile, personally.
Yes, I think so too. I agree. And there's a lot of stuff online that is good information. Some of it, it's like anything else. You'll find some weird stuff out there, but a lot of the information you'll find online regarding the existence of God is quality, and you can usually tell the quality of it in the first 30 seconds. Now, why am I talking about this? It is my belief, and I get it from a passage in Ecclesiastes for one, but just about the whole picture of God creating humanity. It is my belief that within every single human being, there is this desire to seek out God. One of the evidences for God that's been raised up in the past and is an excellent evidence for his existence is when you look at every human culture worships. They might not worship the true and living God, but they worship something. Every human culture has its religion or religions. Every human culture is reaching out for a higher being. That's in every human culture that's ever existed, not just the ones now, but every human culture. Corey?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because that's something we talk about at work all the time. We talk about the religion of climate change and the religion of politics. And you see people, and if they don't know God or they're not Christians, they will seek something out to worship.
Yes.
And they will elevate it to the status of God.
Absolutely.
It can be about anything, but there's several big ones, you know, and it's interesting that people will get to the point that that climate change is a religion to them, you know, or politics are a religion to them. They will seek it out as if it was God.
There's got to be something that gives our lives meaning. All of us have that sense. And if it's not God that we put in that position, we're going to pursue something, whatever it is, that we believe gives us meaning. And things like that might, for a while, give us a sense of meaning and purpose, but they begin to play out. It's like eating junk food. Twinkies are great when you're eating them. And donuts, you've heard me praise donuts. All that cereal, I could go through a box of Cocoa Krispies and nothing flat, and I could use chocolate milk as the go-on. What's going to happen to me the next day? Eventually, it's going to catch up to me. Eating junk will catch up to you. Just like eating good food will catch up to you. I use these analogies a lot, but I think it's built into the creation for us to understand. You eat the good stuff, it might not be as pleasant at first, But the next day you realize, oh, you know what? I could breathe. I can move around. I feel like doing something. I have energy. I now have ambition because I feel so good. And you find out, oh, there's a payoff. There's always a payoff for doing the right thing. And so it might sound odd. Why am I talking about all this regarding evangelism? Why don't I just go to Matthew 28 where Jesus says, all authority is given me in heaven and earth. Go ye therefore and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation, to all the world, to every creature. You've heard it from Matthew and from Mark and from Luke, the way he talks about it there. We know that. But talking about these things have value to me. Harold, did I miss another hand somewhere? Okay, Harold.
I think one of the things that probably would help people as much as anything in doing what you're talking about is if the church provided a structure that we're trying to help people to learn how to do it in a class, and we're trying to encourage as a church family to encourage people to do that, like bringing your family, inviting your family to worship with us, or Bible classes can be very evangelistic if you try.
Right.
If we try to maybe bring a friend day, or if we try to focus attention to help people, I think we can help people a lot to try to do the very thing you're talking about.
Well, I don't mean to keep it a secret, but when I was putting this class together, this is one of the main things I wanted to talk about encouraging us to be more proactive. I almost hate to use that word, but proactive in talking to people about Jesus or about the church, about anything spiritual that might come around to that. Paul?
Personal experience I've found is usually if you're living it, if you're something that attracts people, and by that I mean like if you're living a successful life, if you are a healthy person, if you are a loving person, if you're merciful, if they see these qualities, you have these golden opportunities at work and, you know, sports, friends, something like that, to set yourself apart, that, in my experience, that draws the question, gives you a little bit more credibility, a little bit more traction with trying to point people towards Christ, as opposed to with zero rapport, zero relationship, zero anything, just coming and, you know, imposing your worldview doesn't seem to be as effective as, wow, man, you know, you totally got fouled in that game and that, you know, ref didn't even see it and you were totally cool about it and you were totally cool with the guy, or somebody at work, you know, gets one over on you and whatever, you're in a position of authority and you still didn't fry the person. Why? Why are you different? That, in my experience, seems to draw people a lot more than just,
Right.
you know, giving them your system of belief.
And if we don't have lives that exude some kind of spirituality, some kind of value, who would want to listen to us anyway? I don't want to get health advice from somebody who's obviously not healthy because of the way I know they've lived. Now, there's something about each one of us. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself on your inclination to talk to somebody else about Jesus? And I'm not asking you to make that known. I'm just thinking in your own mind, rate yourself. Where are you on that scale? And if you're not a 10, and most of us aren't, what question should we be asking ourselves? Why? Why am I not a 10 when it comes to talking to people about Jesus? Now, I'm not asking you to reveal anything about yourself, but what are some reasons you know that other people are less inclined to talk to people about Jesus? Maybe we've already talked about some of them, but what is there that you've noticed that sometimes keeps people from talking to folks about Jesus? Anything at all? All right, Don?
It's been my experience, it's kind of like baseball, you know, if you get 3 out of 10, you're doing really good. And when you talk to people about Jesus, you're doing really good if 3 out of 10 even want to listen. A lot of times you get rejected, so you get tired of that rejection, so then you start holding back a little bit because you already know probably what this response is going to be. But I think we need to think about how Paul and some of the others preached the gospel. They didn't, you know, when they preached it, they preached it to a lot of people.
Right.
About, I would say, I don't know if it was 90% because they just say some sometimes, but but a lot of them wanted to kill him, and a few believed him.
Right.
And they weren't worried about, because when we preach the gospel, you're going to get rejected by most of the people you speak it to. And only a few are going to believe. So if you're going to talk to a group, if you're going to talk to one person, you know, you got to start. I mean, I'm preaching to myself because I know that I shrink back a lot because I think I already know what this person's going to do. And I'm going to meet resistance, and I don't like resistance. You know, I don't want to be bad-mouthed or persecuted or whatever it is to that small, even a small degree. So I don't do that because I know most people aren't going to listen. But we got to realize those people were getting killed by most of the people they were preaching. You know,
Right.
They wanted to be, you know, they were mad. They hated them, and so you're going to get that. It's like Corey said, when they've already elevated their God up to this point, when you preach Jesus, you're taking away their God, and they don't want it.
And along those lines, I want to make it clear, my point this morning in talking about this is not to make anybody feel guilty. I didn't sit down to bring up an outline for this class. Okay, here's where I'm going to make them feel guilty. That is not the point. This is just something we need to consider because what did Jesus tell us? Take the gospel to the world? To the end of the age. He said, do this. We call it what? The Great Commission. We have been commissioned to take the gospel. And somewhere on that scale of 1 to 10, I see myself, and I'm not a 10, and I got to ask myself, why am I not a 10? And when you said baseball analogy, the first place my mind went was stepping up to the plate. I didn't quite hear all the details right after that, but what happens when you step up to the plate in baseball? Somebody throws a ball at you, and it doesn't, you know, they're not trying to hit, well, hopefully they're not trying to hit you, but it's going to come real close. And if he's a good pitcher, it might be going 90 miles an hour, a really good pitcher. Most of the time it's 50. But a baseball will hurt you at 50. However, if you've ever played baseball and you've gotten a really good hit, and it's the same with anything else. If you've played tennis and you get you get that sweet spot and the ball, wow, or you play golf, or whatever, you're shooting hoops, and as soon as it comes off your fingertips, you know that's a swisher right there. And you keep playing because that's what you're looking for. Now, if we'll do that in sports, just wait until you find somebody who wants to talk to you about Jesus. And there's the thing. Not everybody does. Is that okay? What did Jesus say about that? So don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't give what's holy to the dogs. What's he talking about? He's talking about the gospel and truth about God. If somebody doesn't want to talk about that, something about the dust of your feet and going on your way, Bob?
About whether they want to listen.
That's true. And it's based, I think, in fear. We want to make assumptions about what people are going to say and how they're going to respond because, oh man, this is the way it usually happens most of the time. So I don't know if I want to do that. By the way, Paul, yeah, you had a hand up.
It can change. The reasons can change for you to not share the gospel. You know, personally, where I'm at now, I am not embarrassed with the gospel at all. It makes the most sense to me, and I'm perfectly glad to tell anybody about it. But I think a lot of times I don't because right now is a very busy part of my life, and so it's inconvenient for me to devote that much time or to complicate a relationship. Right now I'm moving fast, and I want to keep moving fast, and so sometimes I put my agenda before ultimately what should be my agenda.
Good point. I think a lot of us are like that. There's always some reason to hold back. There's always some reason to wait. Is there anybody in here, and I don't want you to raise a hand, but I'm asking this just to provoke some thought because I know what your answer is going to be. If somebody wanted to talk to you about Jesus, wanted to talk to you about God, would you say, no, I don't want to do that? Would anybody in here say that? I don't think so. I don't think so. Do you believe there are people out there who do have questions about their soul and want to seek out answers for those? I think so. I believe they are there. I think that's why Wendell Lovelace wrote that song years ago, Lead Me to Some Soul Today, asking God, it's a prayer, Lead me to some soul today. Teach me, Lord, just what to say. And that's another one of our fears. What do you say? What do you say? How much of a theologian do you have to be to talk to people about Jesus? In John chapter 4, there was a woman at the well of Samaria. Tell me about that woman. Was she the wife of the mayor? What was it? How many husbands had she had? She'd had 5 husbands, and what about now? You got one right now that's not even your husband. In other words, it may be that she wasn't even married. She was cohabiting with the guy. Now, that would be okay today because everybody thinks that's okay today. But it's not okay today, and it wasn't okay then. And there she was talking to Jesus. By the way, who was Jesus and who was she? She was a Samaritan woman. He was a Jew. And she asked him, "Wait, what are you doing talking to me? Don't the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans?" And that was something that she noticed about him. He's not like the others. And that's what I want people to notice about us. You and I, we're not like the others. Do you know anybody who's had a bad experience with religious people? Don't let that be you. But she talked to Jesus. And what did she do when she left Jesus? She went into her hometown and told everybody about the prophet that she had met. And those guys came out to see him. What qualifications did she have? Of course, her marital situation, we've talked about that. Some have said, this is speculation, but they said the reason she was there by herself was unusual because most of the time all the women in the village came out together in the morning to get water, but she was there at a different time of day, and she was apparently by herself, meaning she was probably a social outcast. Now, that's a speculation, but it makes sense when you think about it, because there probably weren't too many state troopers on the way out. Anything could have happened, but she went out to the well outside of town by herself, and there she was. And yet, this is the woman who goes back into town and tells people about Jesus, and they come out. What did the people of the town say? What did the men of the town say when they come out and talk to Jesus themselves because of what she had said? Said, now we believe, not because of the woman's word, but because we've seen it for ourselves. Mike?
When it comes to evangelism also, a lot of times people in the church are reluctant because in the past people have tried a one-size-fits-all evangelism program.
Right.
Because one individual has had a lot of success with a certain approach. They think that, okay, all I have to do is train everybody in the church in this particular way, and it'll work. And we know from experience that that's not so. Everybody's different. Everybody has different skills, different, whatever. So you mentioned something a little bit before about a song there, "Lead Me to Some Soul Today." I also heard in one of these evangelism seminars, the speaker said it all begins with prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Not only a prayer in the congregation, but as individuals, it begins with prayer to ask God to use you in evangelism, just like you ask Him to use you in a worship service or in benevolence or whatever. You ask Him to use you in evangelism, and I believe that He will use you. Understanding all of your strengths and weaknesses, there'll be a situation where you can evangelize.
Right.
And it's not, you have to bring 50 souls to Christ this year. It isn't about that, if you bring one soul, the heavens are rejoicing, Anyway, my point is, everyone is different, and I think the idea of beginning with prayer and asking God to kind of use your skills and abilities to make you useful. I give myself as an example. I can speak in public with no problems, but one-on-one, I'm not really very
good at that type of interaction for teaching purposes. But I found a way to talk to a lot of people through Bible talk. God found a way for me to use my skills to reach people, in a way that I couldn't before. So,
Right. And prayer, that's the first place to start. Why would it not be the first place to start? You want to reach out, and if you're praying about this, you're asking God to help you with something that He's told you to do. So, hey, you're following in line with me. It's like if I were to tell one of my children to do something, they said, "Well, Daddy, I don't know how to do that. Would you help me?" Well, yeah, I'm going to help you because I'm a good dad. That's what I want to be, and that's what God is. He's a good father, and when He teaches us to do something, He's going to help us do that. So start with asking. Now, you and I, we know our inclinations and we know our disinclinations. But when we get into what Jesus says and we start thinking about what He means to you and to me, it starts to change our inclination towards doing exactly what we're talking about. And if you want to develop a relationship with somebody or just have a conversation, how do you have a conversation? What's something you can do that will help that conversation move along? And you younger guys who want to eventually start talking to girls, you need to learn this. How do you have a conversation with a girl if you're a teenage boy and you're awkward and don't know what to say and how to talk? How do you have a conversation with a girl? Do what? Common interests. There you go, Bob. Oh, common interests. How do you find out about common interests? You ask questions. You ask questions. You young guys, make yourself a list of questions. If you have to write it on the palm of your hand, I never like doing that myself, but you can carry a piece of paper with you and put it on don't put it on your phone, because if you're talking to a girl, throw your phone in the pond. Get rid of your phone. That's the thing to do. And as you're talking to her, have these questions in your mind to ask. What might you ask a young lady about? Had to come up. How about a favorite movie? How do you got any hobbies? How do you like to spend your time when you're alone by yourself or you're home? What are some other questions? What music do you like? What are you doing what's that? What are you looking for in life? Now, Harold, you're getting deep. That's pretty deep right there. But tell me that's not a good question. You want to get to that point at some point. You want to get there. That's what we're looking at, is finding out what their real values are. How do you find out what real values are without asking questions? The tendency that a lot of us have, and me included, is to tell people things rather than to ask people things. But the only way you can draw somebody out is by asking questions. If we ask questions, we draw people into the conversation. And when we ask questions, we give people a sense, I'm open to what you have to say. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm not just open to it, I'm asking for it. What do you think about this? Now, when they tell you what their favorite movie is, no matter what it is, do not say, that's a stupid movie. I hated that. And unless you have a way to frame your opinion in a different way that will help continue to engage them. What's this all about? Am I trying to teach young guys how to get a date? Oh, yeah. You didn't know you were going to get that in Bible class, did you? But what I'm really talking about is engaging people. Really engaging people. And if somebody doesn't want Jesus, they will let you know. But somebody might, but they might not be sure about it from you until they talk to you, and then they find out, oh, this guy's all right. This girl knows what she's talking about. She's interested in me as a person, for a friend, or has respect for me. Write that down. No matter who you talk to, respect better be at the top of the list for who they are and what they are. That's got to be it in all human relationships. But if we're able to converse with people in such a way that we can show them that, if there's any opportunity for us to talk to them, it'll open up. And God will help us with that. If they don't want the Lord, there's nothing you can do to change that I know of. I've never found anything. Went to school at Bear Valley. We had several evangelism classes where we learned what the Bible says about evangelism and how to put passages of Scripture together in order to teach them certain aspects of Jesus' teaching and how to become a Christian and about the church. But all of us as young students, what's the magic bullet? We might not ask it that way, but what do you say to make people want Jesus? And there isn't anything. Jesus told the parable about the soils. How many kinds of soil were there? There were 4 kinds of soil. Now here's the tricky part. Only one kind of soil was immediately rejecting the seed. The other 3 accepted the seed. You might talk to somebody about Jesus, and it might look real good at first, but they might be that rocky soil where what you're talking to them about takes root, but it doesn't have enough ground to put roots into, and eventually it goes away. Or you might be somebody who talks about Jesus with somebody who's thorny soil, and they'll maybe even become a Christian, and they'll grow up and they'll mature, and then the cares of the world will choke it out, and they'll fall away. But what's the other kind of soil? The other kind of soil is you. Is there anybody out there searching like you? Anybody out there waiting like you were? Anybody out there who is open like you are to the gospel of Jesus Christ? And I'm convinced that there are. When Paul wrote to Timothy, and I've been mentioning these passages, we haven't gone to any of them, but go to 1 Timothy chapter 4. I apologize for that. I shouldn't do that, but sometimes I get in a hurry. Shouldn't be in that much of a hurry. 1 Timothy chapter 4. This is what Paul writes to Timothy. He is an evangelist. This is his work. You and I might not be evangelists in the same sense that Timothy was, but listen to what he says. 1 Timothy 4, verse 1, Spirit explicitly says that in later times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons, by means of the hypocrisy of liars, seared in their own conscience as with a branding iron. Men who forbid marriage and advocate abstaining from foods which God has created to be gratefully shared in by those who believe and know the truth. For everything created by God is good, and nothing to be rejected if it is received with gratitude, for it is sanctified by the means of the word of God and prayer. What's he talking about? Talking about there's a time coming when nobody's going to want to hear the truth. Anything but the truth, but not the truth. Paul said there would be a time when the word would be in season. What else did he say? He said there would be a time when the word would be out of season. Sometimes it's in, sometimes it's out. It seems to me, and I don't want to make too much of a judgment, but it seems like right now is kind of an out of season time. Anybody disagree with that? I'd be glad to hear if you disagree. I'm not trying to disparage you from talking to people about the Lord, but this is a reality. Have any of you fishermen ever gone fishing even when somebody said the fish aren't biting? I don't care. I'm going to fish. Yeah, keep fishing because you never know. Even if this is an out of season time, what did Paul say? He said, keep preaching, keep preaching. And I might be wrong about that. I get the sense in our country that people are satisfied, they're comfortable, And when you're comfortable, you don't seek much change. If you've got an income, if you've got food in the fridge, if your relationships are okay, you've got a life that's not so bad, why change it? And I think that might be part of America's problem. When you go back to Judges and you read through the Judges, when everything was going great, that's when the people fell into sin. When everything was restored and people were prospering, that's when they got lax in their spirituality. And I think that may be where we are in America today. There's a lot of spiritual laxity because we are doing so well. God has blessed us. That's a possible observation I have. How should that impact our evangelism? How should that impact our willingness to talk to people about Jesus? Shouldn't change it at all. Mike?
Well, in the parable that you mentioned about the soils, I think one thing we need to keep in mind as well is, yes, there are different kind of soils, where you're sowing seed and nothing happens. But even in the good soil, he says at the end, when the harvest comes, 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. So even that, even our successes are measured. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not always 100%. It's not always everybody is converted and becomes hot as a Christian and stays hot all the time and so on. It's 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. And I think he's not warning us, but he's telling us the reality of the situation.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's great, there's a great harvest. Sometimes the harvest is less. And as you said, but just keep on sowing the seed. The point is to just keep on sowing the seed. You don't quit. Even if there's a 30-fold harvest, doesn't mean, I quit. No, you keep sowing the seed.
Incidentally, I don't know if we ever think about this. Why did they sow seed in the first century? So they could eat? How important is it to sow seed if your ability to keep from starving is dependent upon that? Harold?
Oftentimes people ask me, how are you doing? And I say, well, the Lord's really blessed me. That's
Right.
kind of my answer. But many times I talk to people and they have a positive response to that. And I have thought that if I had, like Stafford North's little study program about teaching people about coming to faith and what they need to do, if I had something like that, just had it in my pocket, they say something like that, and I say, well, I sure appreciate your thought. Let me give you this little material, let you look at it.
Right.
Why not do something like that?
Right, exactly.
And it starts out with, well, the Lord has really blessed me.
If we're ready, if our mindset is, I'm ready to fish anytime. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, and the first bell is rung and the second one's about to ring, so we'll close with this, and then Lord willing, come back to this when we start next week's class. Paul's writing to the church at Corinth, and he's been working there, and Apollos has been working there, and this is what he says. Verse 5, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 5. What then is Apollos and what is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, even as the Lord gave opportunity to each one. As the Lord gave what? As the Lord gave opportunity, or as the Lord gave each one. The word opportunity is put in there, but it seems to be understood. I planted, Paul says, Apollos watered, but who caused the growth? Understanding this has relieved me of so much guilt. I don't have to convert anybody. Not only do I not have to convert anybody, I can't convert anybody. I don't have the ability to turn a soul to the Lord. What do I have the ability to do? I have the ability to preach the gospel. And not as a preacher. If you've come to Christ, you have everything you need to tell somebody about Jesus and what they need to do to be saved. If you're a member of the Lord's church, you already know 100%, well, 100% is a lot, but you know a high percentage more than almost anybody out there. Preston?
We all have a void. When we were separated from God in the garden, there's a void. We may not be able to put our finger on it, but we know that there's something there. And like was talked about, we fill it with different things.
Right.
So we give them something the information to fill the void with, and we show it in a loving manner, and we know everybody's scared. And you know, it's just something that, like you say, we present them, and then let God get the increase.
Right. It really relieves us of all that responsibility. All right, Lord willing, I've said something this morning, and we've talked about things this morning that will help us be a little more conscious of this through the week. I want to come back next week and reinforce this. Anybody got anything? Questions, observations, comments? All right, Lord bless you. Thank you for being here.